This is RTV6 News at 5:30, working for you.
And now at 5:30, the city-county building just reopened Monday and already long lines for one service. What these people all want to get. And the challenge is out for you to complete 500 miles of physical activity. Could you do it? We'll explain what this is all about. Chris.
All right, let's take a look at our lineup today. We were getting perspective on calls for racial justice from a man who went to jail for marching with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., where he says change is still needed. Plus, bank overdraft fees are on hold for now, but you could be required to pay it back later. How to get around this. And the research on remote learning is in. It's not promising. The students getting left behind, and who could end up paying to fix this?
And first at 5:30, long lines at the city-county building just one day after partially reopening as part of the city's Stage 4 plan. Police services are included in that reopening, and one in particular led to this line, getting gun permits. Call 6 Investigates recently uncovered new numbers that show more Hoosiers are getting licensed to carry a gun. In Indiana, you don't need a license to have a gun in your home, but you do if you want to take your gun in your car or out in public. The most recent numbers we have for the first quarter of 2020, Indiana State Police approved 16,020 gun licenses, a 20% increase compared to the same time period last year, and a 35% increase compared to the last part of 2019. We spoke with one young man about why he's getting his license to carry.
I mean, you just never know in the world with all this stuff going on. You'll never know. So you always have it if it's there. I definitely say it's more comfortable just to have one than not to have one. Doesn't mean you're going to use it. Just if you needed to, it's there.
And starting July 1st, a 5-year gun license will cost you nothing. Right now, it's a $30 state fee plus any local fee. We have requested updated figures on permit applications from state police. That could take up to 45 days. And more long lines, this time at the BMV. This is the first day most branches have been open to walk-in traffic since March 23rd. And it's been a very busy day. By 10 a.m., just 2 hours after opening, branches had already processed 5,400 transactions. Waits at some branches are more than an hour long. Part of that is due to only allowing a few people in at a time for social distancing. The BMV expects these high transaction numbers to continue for the next several days and possibly weeks ahead, and warn you should be prepared to wait outside for an extended period of time. Kevin, not a bad day to stand outside today.
Yeah, perfect. It may be a little different story later in the week, but sunscreen, definitely you need that. Let's take a look at the view to the west, and it looks beautiful over White River and areas toward the Indianapolis Zoo. We talked about the zoo reopening, the animals waiting to see you. Temperature today, we managed with all that sunshine to hit 83. That's where we should be. 82 is the average high for this time of year. It's all about the numbers this evening because we've got nothing to talk about as far as the radar. Martinsville and Fishers, Plainfield, and New Powell, all in there at 82 degrees. Statewide temperatures, not much of a range. Gary at 79. Sometimes if you get the wind off of the lake, it can be quite a different story up there in northern Indiana. That wind is out of the east-southeast, and our temperatures through the evening hours look like this. Will fall after sunset to the mid-70s. Overnight lows closer to 60. We'll talk about the changes that arrive starting tomorrow coming up.
The president taking action on police reform today, signing an executive order that creates more oversight in departments, including creating a database tracking instances of police misconduct and encouraging, not necessarily requiring, law enforcement to involve social workers on calls where they're dealing with people battling homelessness, mental illness, and addiction. The president said he met with and made a promise to the families of recent police violence victims.
All Americans mourn by your side. Your loved ones will not have died in vain. We are one nation, we grieve together, and we heal together.
The White House also saying efforts need to be focused on officer retention and recruitment within communities. Departments that meet certain standards could get federal grants, money for things like improved training on use of force standards and de-escalation tactics, something that police experts say is already in practice but sometimes ignored.
What we see is an outcropping of, for lack of a better term, poor decision-making as opposed to lack of training. So if every police officer followed the current use of force standards, I don't think we would see any of these horrific events that we have seen.
The president says he wants Congress to pass additional police reform legislation. Today's order addresses some issues Democrats called for in their bill. They also want to end certain police practices like chokeholds and no-knock warrants. Senate Republicans plan to introduce their own police reform proposal tomorrow. Well, now to a new breakthrough in the battle against coronavirus. Researchers in England say they have the first evidence that a drug can improve survival from COVID-19. They found it in a steroid named dexamethasone. Now, in their study, the steroid was able to reduce deaths by a third in patients who are severely ill. This is from the same study that showed hydroxychloroquine was not working. Children and teens are half as likely as adults to get infected with coronavirus. According to a new study published today, children usually don't develop the same symptoms as adults. Since the early stages of the pandemic, doctors have found children rarely die from the virus, but they can still spread it. These new findings could guide how and when schools reopen. All right, ahead in our lineup, banks are giving breaks on overdraft fees. What you may not realize is that you'll still have to pay that money back. The push to change this.
12 months.
Trust me. More brick-and-mortar stores are reopening their doors to customers, and many of them are holding sales. Consumer reporter John Matarese is working for you, looking at the reason behind the sudden markdowns and bargains.
It's the battle of the store reopening sales. As stores start to open up again after a 2-month shutdown, you may find some deals as good as a going out of business sale. Are you ready to shop again? Malls and retail centers are finding traffic very light as they reopen this month. So they're slashing prices to get you back to clear out summer merchandise they never had a chance to sell. The crazy coupon lady says TJ Maxx and Marshalls now have more than half their stores at clearance prices. Nordstrom Rack was adding an extra 40% off the first week after reopening. And it still has big savings on Vans, Tommy Hilfiger, Kate Spade, and more. And Burlington has much of its clothing and shoes at 50% off with insane prices on Nike, Sperry, and Converse. But from the Doesn't That Stink file, new COVID realities that could make shopping less enjoyable. Most stores are not allowing you to try on merchandise, even closing their fitting rooms due to health concerns. That means you have to guess your size, and if it doesn't fit, you have to come back. Most stores are also operating at reduced hours, which stinks if you work odd hours. But at least they're open again. Once a store has been open a couple of weeks and customers start coming back, expect prices to go back to normal. But until then, don't waste your money. I'm John Matarese for WRTV 6.
The financial effects of the pandemic are far from over. People with low income and high debt have been hit hard by overdraft fees. According to the Center for Responsible Lending, only 2 major banks have halted these fees during this time. It's Ally Bank and Prudential Bank of Philadelphia. Ally plans on charging these fees again starting July 17th. But most banks have either continued charging overdraft fees or are delaying them, which means customers will get hit by a wave of fees once that delay is lifted. Now, people who have been laid off are expected to have a difficult time paying that money back.
People are under financial distress. People are concerned. People are, taking more time to take care of their families. They're spending more on health care, and they may just not have access to the employment that they are accustomed to having.
Instead, the Center for Responsible Lending is calling for alternatives. It says, at the very least, banks can afford to drop overdraft fees during this time because they are borrowing money at a 0% interest rate right now. Banks can also afford to charge smaller fees.
It costs pennies on the dollar to provide the overdraft fee, especially with such a short time that the fee is outstanding. As I say, banks have access to consumers' paychecks and income and deposits as soon as it hits the account.
Banks are usually repaid within 2 or 3 days after a customer overdrafts on their account. They're also proposing a limit on the amount of overdraft fees a bank can charge or how much a bank can charge. Now, some banks are willing to drop the fee, but only if a customer asks them, and it is on a case-by-case basis. All right, let's get back to our lineup. There are many parents worried about how their children will learn in the fall, especially after findings that many students are being left behind with remote learning. We're taking a look at who might end up paying to fix this.
Keller and Keller, right now.
Nearly every student in America spent their final months of the school year with remote learning. And now, new information shows that system fell far short for kids. And Maya Rodriguez has this story.
With a total of 6 adopted and foster children, Carrie Penland's family is an exercise in planning and patience.
Trying to do school with them has been insane.
All are school-aged kids, some with learning disabilities. When the coronavirus pandemic hit, they, along with tens of millions of students across the country, became part of a nationwide experiment in remote learning. Carrie's verdict?
I don't know how anybody is doing this, to be honest. It's not possible.
Turns out she's not alone.
We found that remote learning is really failing our most vulnerable learners.
Justin Rubin is with the nonprofit Parents Together. The group recently conducted a survey of more than 1,500 families across the country to see how remote learning was going. Among the findings, when compared to a family making $100,000 a year, lower income families making $25,000 or less are 10 times more likely to have children doing little to no remote learning. And they are 5 times more likely to attend a school not offering distance learning materials at all. 13% of those families didn't even have a computer device or internet access. But the numbers were even worse for families of children with special needs, who usually get individualized support at school. 40% of those families said with remote learning, they were receiving no support at all.
A huge chunk of students are being left behind by remote learning.
Parents Together says the federal government needs to step in with more funding for education since the coronavirus pandemic slashed tax revenues for local and state budgets and, in turn, education programs. Back at Carrie Penland's house,
I'll tell you, if school doesn't start again, the kids are going to be way, way behind.
It's a school year that ended way too soon.
It's a different time than we've ever experienced.
I'm Maya Rodriguez reporting.
Maya, thank you. And experts do have some suggestions to keep kids engaged over the summer. First, you want to keep structure. A visual schedule everyone can see will help and make it easier for you and your kids to get back into the swing of things when summer comes to a close. Also, read to your children or encourage them to read or write or draw anything that engages their mind. And a final tip, consider outdoor hikes, walks, or scavenger hunts to keep them discovering new things. Now, we continue to see the devastating effects coronavirus is having on the most vulnerable Americans in long-term care facilities. Now, looking at state data, the Wall Street Journal has found at least 50,000 virus deaths are related to these facilities. That's more than 40% of all U.S. deaths. Requirements to report long-term care facility deaths, they differ state to state, even with the White House's order to report them to the CDC, so it is expected those numbers could be higher.
Thanks, Chris. 500 miles. To give you some perspective, that's 200 laps around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's about the distance to drive from Indianapolis to Mackinac Island, Michigan. Now the 500 Festival is challenging you to compete in the first ever Indianapolis 500-mile virtual challenge. You're being asked to test yourself and complete 500 miles of physical activity like running, walking, biking, swimming, or wheelchair racing from between June 22nd, that's Monday, and December 31st. If you start Monday, you would need to complete 2.6 miles a day to reach your goal. You also have the option of taking part in a 100-mile challenge as well. You will log your miles online. All participants will receive a shirt, medal, and pin. You can register now for $60 at indymini.com/500 miles. However, it's only open to 8,000 people, so if you want to do it, sign up now.
I think I'm on. In my peripheral vision is my exercise bike right over there, so I just may be up to that challenge. I'd bring the bike over here, but it doesn't roll. It's one of those that's kind of stationary and it's too heavy. Temperature's 83 in Indianapolis. Temperature in Lafayette at 84. Lots of sunshine. I'll expand this, and you'll see where the heat is. We're talking about warmer temperatures arriving in the Hoosier State. It's still a couple states away. Look at the Central Plains. 94 in Valentine, Nebraska. As you go into the Dakotas, temperatures mid 90s. It would be a warm day to visit Mount Rushmore. I was just looking, temperatures there at 93. I'd like to visit there someday on a cooler day. Tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, basically dry. I threw in the qualifier basically because Thursday along the state line with Ohio, we could have a shower or thunderstorm. All of us will have the threat for some rain as we get to Saturday. During the day tomorrow, temperature almost 80 degrees by noon. Afternoon temperatures in areas north of Indy probably stay just shy of 85. Typically, I show you TrueCast to locate showers and thunderstorms and the timing of those, but notice what happens when I just let the clock roll. We have a few fair weather clouds pop up. That's really about it. There's your temperature trend that we've been talking about. These temperatures continue to warm a couple degrees each day. 85 tomorrow, almost to the 90-degree mark as we get to Thursday, and we should get there Friday. If not, if at first we don't succeed, you try again. We'll have more opportunities as we go into the weekend.
In May 1963, hundreds of students from across Birmingham, Alabama, marched in the streets as part of what is known as the Birmingham Movement. For some who took part, today's protests bring back painful memories. As part of our series that explores the current discussion about race, Dan Grossman spoke with one man jailed after marching with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who says today's marches feel eerily similar.
This is me with my first granddaughter.
At various times in our lives, we find ourselves looking back.
That's my oldest. That's my baby girl.
Sometimes with affection.
How proud are you in that photo? You can't tell.
Other times with affliction.
If you can see this particular picture, that individual in the middle, that little 16-year-old boy, was terrified.
For Albert Scruggs Jr., the images of his childhood in Birmingham, Alabama are violent.
I get very emotional.
They are painful.
Because it seems like it was only yesterday.
And they resurface now more than ever.
Seems like I can still feel the pressure of that water hose. Every time I see someone on television getting hit with one of those batons, I feel it. I've got the whips and the bruises to show.
The passion that led Albert to fight for racial change alongside Dr. King still burns nearly 60 years later as he sits in his home in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
They are fighting for the same thing that we fought for in 1963.
But at times, he finds its flame dwindling because of the lack of progress he sees.
We got complacent. We believe that change has come. However, it hasn't.
He says it happens in the job market, the public store, and schools. Palpable inequalities that are both subconscious and otherwise. And it's why he says these protests need to happen, but properly.
I saw where the market house here in Fayetteville was set on fire. When it gets to the place where it turns to anarchy or it turns to looting, then we have chosen the wrong path.
For Albert, the path he helped forge in '63 led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
It just lets me know that that lick upside the head wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
It also laid the blueprint for a movement that is seeking a better future for his grandkids' generation.
When you get an education or you learn something, no one can take that from you. And if what you experience will help someone else, then that in itself is a success.
In Fayetteville, North Carolina, I'm Dan Grossman reporting.
Powerful story, Dan. Thank you. All right, next in our lineup, we are seeing all kinds of new products to help prevent the spread of COVID-19, the designs that you can replicate for free.